Issues like these fetch ever higher prices, and the bidding by collectors and dealers sets new world records.
At $105,000, then, standing in the rear at $105,000. Baron, $105,000.
High prices encourage plunder, say the archaeologists. But gallery owners like New York's Andre Emmerich defend the antiquities trade.
There is a war on in the field of what we might call archaeology between people who call themselves field archaeologists, people who go out and dig, and others interested in, let's say, pre-Columbian art, museum curators, conservators, archaeologists who write, people who collect, people who deal. The field archaeologists want everything left in the ground, that is in the ground, to be excavated by them slowly over the generations. Never mind the real world and the freelance excavating that goes on, which, by the way, is a much better word than looting. Looting, by definition, implies a crime. Looting is a crime. Freelance excavating is not.
Some dealers and collectors claim they take better care of objects than the host country, the country from which they come. But that sentence is totally inadequate. It completely belies how they got the object in the first place. Every object that a dealer sells and a collector collects was once in a tomb that was covered and protected, was once in a mound that was covered and protected, waiting for an archaeologist to excavate it painstakingly and with care and love, you see. So that the object they have does not represent care, it represents destruction.
The story of how plunder moves from the graves to the galleries is largely untold, but the recent discovery of a fabulous treasure in Peru has revealed the secrets of the trade. The story began in the California Riviera town of Santa Barbara. While many public galleries did business here in the open, selling to the California elite, Santa Barbara was also the center for a less visible ring of pre-Columbian art smugglers. English-born art dealer Michael Kelly knew how they operated. He had come to Santa Barbara as an expert in Latin American art, both ancient and modern. He dreamt of starting a museum here, but his experience with dealers and collectors left him with few illusions.
In my experience, there are two types of art dealing. There's honest art dealing and dishonest art dealing. And antiquities or primitive art dealers tend to have to be somewhat dishonest because the dealers, the collectors, the museums, everybody who's involved who's a professional and knows the business knows that the bulk of it is illegal. When you're dealing with pre-Columbian art and other art from countries where they have national heritage laws.
Kelly became involved when he made friends with a couple who worked out of this fashionable residence. David and Jacqueline Swetnam were dealers specializing in pre-Columbian textiles, ceramics, and jewelry. With only a high school education, David Swetnam was well on his way to the top. He and his wife ran a successful business importing Peruvian art. David had made his first in 1981 at the age of 24. Today, Peru is one of the poorest Latin American nations. The shantytowns outside Lima, the capital city, are home to one of South America's largest Indian populations. David Swetnam was drawn here by their exotic folk traditions. It was their weavings and ethnic art that the Swetnams first began buying for resale in the United States. But soon, he and Jacqueline went to Peru to acquire more ancient treasures. In 1984, Swetnam met his most important contact in Peru. Fred Drew was an American collector who liked to do business in the back streets of Lima. A retired U.S. State Department contract employee, know everyone. With an eye for exotica like tropical birds, his real passion was ancient ceramics.
To a large extent, I suppose it's an addictive vice, so to speak. I've been at it for a long time. I'm extremely fond of pre-Columbian art. I met David, what, 4 or 5 or 6 years ago, can't recall exactly. And David and his wife both came over to look at some things which I had. They were beginners at the time, largely beginners. They'd had some experience in Peruvian, some in, say in Bolivian, some Peruvian textiles. But to a large extent, they were beginners. But they were both very, very enthusiastic about things, and I tried to assist them in every way that I could. And in fact, I gave them a number of pieces on consignment to take back with them to experiment with. And then later on, we collaborated more closely. And on his trips to Peru, he would acquire other things from me to take back with him.
Fred felt that he was almost a father figure to David, teaching him about the art and about the business. And David, I think, used that, and I think David played on that relationship tremendously, and one of his main aims in doing that was to have Fred exclude the other dealers. He wanted to become the top dealer in the States. That was his main ambition, and he was trying to find ways to cut off the other dealers' supply.
Drew became Swetnam's main source for Peruvian artifacts like these, and according to Kelly, a steady stream of packages began arriving from Drew.
They would contain photographs showing what was currently available, what the dealers would say had been recently surfaced or fresh pieces. In other words, they're pieces that come from the huaqueros from the various archaeological sites.
Drew and Swetnam found ways to circumvent Peru's export ban on pre-Columbian artifacts. One method they used involved disguising genuine antiques as reproductions like these and declaring them as modern folk art. This letter from Drew to Swetnam showed how their smuggling operation worked. Peruvian antiquities were disguised as modern replicas purchased in Bolivia. But soon they would have to contend with U.S. Customs. Senior Special Agent Gaston Wallace is an expert on pre-Columbian art smuggling.
It is very, very difficult for an individual to import directly out of Peru, Peruvian artifacts into the United States. So what one must do is one must attempt by some fashion to hide the country of origin of these items. And the way that you do that, and the way that Mr. Swetnam did it, was he moved the artifacts, literally smuggled them out of Peru into another country, then shipped them from that country, that Latin nation, to Canada for ultimate smuggling into the United States.
Swetnam and Drew were sending crates of artifacts through Canada in the spring of 1985. Canadian Customs suspected they contained narcotics.
They've labeled them as a replica. Yeah.
The false bottoms said, made in Bolivia. The replica ruse was unmasked. Under oath in Canadian federal court, Swetnam stated he had never purchased pre-Columbian art in South America, but only at Sotheby's auctions.
Well, feeling as we do morally about the collecting of Peruvian art, we felt that there was really very little wrong in pursuing our avocation and bringing it into this country where we felt it was better cared for, that it was shared with a greater number of people, and the laws really mattered very little to us. We felt that the Peruvian authorities really didn't have a great degree of concern about the art, that that was basically our motivation.
The The Canadian seizures did little to discourage the Swetnams. With their rare Peruvian dogs, they affected a wealthy California lifestyle. It was part of their appeal to clients eager for the top-quality antiquities the Swetnams were continuing to import.
You know, there's a trend in a lot of business, but especially in the arts. If you have a lot of money to spend on the art, you're not going to go to some second-hand art dealer who lives in a unsavory neighborhood who sells things cheap. You want to go to the best and buy it for as much money as they'll take from you.
In fact, they didn't own this fashionable home where they did business. The Swetnams were only house-sitting.
It was a little bit like a fantasy island. David used the house to make anybody's dreams come true. He would have guests there and pretend it was his house, or people. He would entertain people there. They had dinners there, and they had the swimming pool and played tennis, and it was very impressive. I mean, people would come from different places to possibly buy art.
Many Santa Barbara collectors and dealers were impressed with the Swetnams' inventory, but with the Canadian pipeline shut down, they needed a new smuggling route and a new partner. Swetnam's friendship with Michael Kelly became a business association. As a British citizen, Kelly could import artifacts from England as personal effects. The arrangement would involve them both in the deal of a lifetime. In February 1987, on the northwest coast of Peru, at a place called Sipan, came news of a spectacular discovery. In one of the New World's richest burial grounds, tomb robbers found gold treasures worth millions. The Bernal brothers were huaqueros, the first to uncover what later were called the royal tombs of Sipan. When the huaqueros moved out, impoverished villagers moved in. Sifting the dirt, they hoped to find more treasure left by their ancestors. News of the looting reached authorities, and armed guards chased the villagers away. In a raid to recover the plundered treasures, one of the Bernal brothers was shot dead. But the authorities were too late. Sackfuls of looted gold artifacts like these were already for sale on the black market in Lima. An official archaeological excavation uncovered an even richer tomb after the site was cordoned off. The Sipan Mound was a burial ground for a little-known pre-Inca culture called the Moche. Dr. George Stewart is a staff archaeologist with National Geographic, which funded the dig.
Sipan is showing us a lot about a very little-known civilization that probably created some of the greatest works of art and incredible culture of adaptation and success in all of New World prehistory. And we've never really known as much as we want to about it. We never know as much as we want to about anything. That's one of the things about archaeology. But the Sipan find is one of those rare cases where archaeologists actually have a chance to dig up something very spectacular.
The Bernal brothers had missed this tomb by a few feet. It gave scholars some idea of what had been lost. The skeletons were covered with breastplates, rattles, and necklaces of golden peanuts. It was called the King Tut's Tomb of Peru.